Just not sure what's going on. And she's out here. But Sarah's not. Yes. Never. What goes on the office today?
You scheduled this on Valentine's Day.
Is this thing on? Awesome. Okay, if anyone is out there, come on in. I said we were going to get started earlier this time, and we're getting started later. So it's okay. Come on in. Anyone here on a date? Bonus points. Happy Valentine's Day. Like our new mics, guys? We won't have to play hopscotch the whole time. Plus, I feel like a rapper. All right. Well, guys, welcome to the second Parenting with Purpose seminar. This week, we're going to be talking about, it says education, but we're going to be talking about engaging with culture. And this can be a pretty dicey topic. And so, yeah, we'll just hang in there, but it's important, and we're excited about it. Jeff, you want to pray for us?
Sure. Be happy to. Let's pray. Our Heavenly Father, we do thank you and give you praise that we have this opportunity to come together to learn more about you and your ways, and just pray that you would give us your wisdom, give these parents who are offering their perspectives wisdom to speak your truth. And I pray that it would be beneficial and edifying to the body of Christ. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, so just to pump you guys up about what's to come, some words that I already see on this. We got goblins. We got Santa Claus. We got, what else? Little Bear. Drugs and alcohol, all right? So we're going to have a good time. But first, I just wanted to give everyone a chance to speak to the crowd. Can you just say your name, and then if you have any like overarching principles of like your philosophy of kind of, you know, cultural engagement, if that even makes sense, would you share that?
So something that Jeff and I talk about a lot is that it's easy to think as a parent, your main job is to shelter your kids and protect them, which it is partially to protect them, but we just keep reminding ourselves that our main goal is to prepare them to live godly lives in the world. And so our decisions often have to come back to that principle. Is this decision going to help us prepare them better or not prepare them better? And then it makes everything a little bit harder because you don't want to, it's easier to just to say no to everything, but it's not always in their best interests to just say, well, let's just protect them by saying no to everything. So, all right.
What she said.
I'm Lisa Wortham. I don't know philosophy. We just got through it the best we could. We tried to have open conversations. I guess that's the biggest thing, is just to, it was a constant adjustment as they grew, because early on, no should be just all you need to do. And then we started needing a reason why, so that we could understand the reasoning. And then we had to have real open conversations about if we had differing opinions. So that's in a nutshell.
I agree. No, well, Lisa and I were talking earlier that raising kids today is a different culture than when we raised our kids. And there's lots of other, there's just lots of stuff out there to pull their mind away, and how do you protect that? And you're going to not be able to protect them 100% of the time, and you're going to have open and frank discussions frequently about things that are not good. and it's going to be hard. And you'll need to say no, and they'll be defiant, and you'll need to say no again. So, just get ready.
I'm Rose Routsong. I would agree that a lot's changed just in our 20 years of parenting. Looking back, I just didn't see things coming quite as fast as they did. And so I can look back and say, well, if I knew then what I knew now, then I might do some things differently. But I will say one thing that has been just such a blessing is that we have been very united. Steve and I spend a lot of time talking about these issues and praying together. And I just see God's grace written all over that. But it has taken us being united.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think when I was talking to Rose on the way over here, we definitely are like the pioneers, I think, with our children, with the internet, with media, social media, these topics that we're going to be discussing tonight. But I definitely think from the theme from last week, the shepherding a child's heart, there's a lot of resources out there. We read that. I think that was one of the Tripp brothers that you studied with at Westminster, Ted Tripp, yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. Obviously, the Bible is the best resource, but I think the openness, the transparency, being proactive certainly, and knowing that you're going to run into these areas, and we certainly have failed, and knowing when you failed, make those corrections as early as possible. When you realize something, went down the wrong way, the wrong path, and I'm sure we're going to be discussing all that. So,
All right. Thank you, Steve, because I really couldn't decide where to start, but you mentioned the internet, and it seems like a really relevant topic. So let's talk about internet technology. It's changed even, in the past 5 years into something that is maybe unrecognizable from maybe what you guys experienced growing up. All right, let's get past that. The internet is this magic thing that comes out of a box. Anyway, what kind of boundaries have you guys set with the internet, technology, social media, and then adding on to that, how and when should you prepare your children for encounters with porn? I know we're starting off with a really fun one, but take it away. Anyone?
I guess I'll start it off. So we're kind of in the throes of this right now because our children are only 14 and 12. And so I'm looking forward to hearing what some of the other parents have to say. So basically, we had a situation where we got both of our kids' laptops, and then they started vanishing into their rooms with their laptops and just not being present with us anymore in the house. And we were like, okay, well, that's not happening anymore. So we brought the laptops downstairs, and if they wanted to be on the computer, it had to be on the first floor, basically in our presence. And it wasn't so much that we were concerned that they were looking at the wrong things online. It was the fact that they were disengaged from us. And then we later discovered that one of our children, who will remain nameless, was in fact watching shows on the internet that we didn't think were very edifying to her spiritual growth. And so we just sort of discovered that, and we put it into it. Said, you're not watching that anymore, period. And I said, you know, whatever you're watching on your computer, I can find out. I have ways to find out where you've been. So I think instilling a little bit of fear about that is not a bad idea, but that's sort of, so we started by limiting where they could use it and then also the amount of time. And so I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Bridget. Trying to be brief so we can get through.
It's tough, and we really are in the thick of it because Jeff sort of gave away the other child. So our son, our son has different temptations. You know, like that's what you find out is your kids have different temptations, and his is definitely just a tendency to be addicted to video games, and it is really hard. And we limited his video game use to things that were not destructive or going against God's law. So no murder, no stealing, you know, things like that. And like Minecraft was more creative, and I still don't think it's all negative for him, but it's addicting and it becomes an idol really quickly. And so we really have to limit him. And he has AirPods now, and that too, like he loves music so much, and there's another way where he can become completely disengaged from us. He can't hear us anymore. He's really learned how to, so we've had to stop that, you know. So talk about, Steve was saying, correcting as you go. That is sort of the way it works. But do we regret giving them some freedom? Not really, because these are the things they're going to have to navigate in the world as they go forward, as they grow up. And if you don't help them see where they're tempted now, because they don't see it, and our son will really become a different person if we give him too much time. And, you know, it's really good that we can see it, and he's becoming able to see it for himself. And so I don't know that I answered any questions, but there you go.
I would just ditto like what you said. You know, you try something and then it gets away from you so fast. So I would say, I know the cell phone question came up, and age. Is that a different question? But I just would say, kind of like I used to be in the school system, and they would tell teachers, start out strict. You can always get lenient. I would say, start out strict. And with each child, it's going to get a little bit, I mean, they're going to look to say, well, my sibling, she got to do this at this age or whatever. But I will say, you know, cell phones when they're driving, I would point out that there are some positive things. And like we have Life 360 on our phone and on our phones. And we don't just track our kids, they track us. You know, they know where we are. And that's especially with the girls who drive home from Anderson at 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning sometimes. We can see where they are, and that's a blessing. And they actually like us. They like that accountability. And they have their friends track them for protection. So there are some positives.
I just add, you know, with the technology, you know, and we're finishing, I guess, with the porn issue, you know, giving all that freedom to, you know, teenagers, you know, I think having something in your hand, you know, certainly you got to take care of that, and, you know, shepherding that, putting restrictions, you know, the parental restrictions, and even with the parental restrictions, I mean, just using the technologies and the apps that are available, you know, that's going to be important. You know, they're going to be exposed to it, you know, and when they are, because it's going to try to find them. I mean, right, you've got these, you know, you can put in ESPN or something, and I mean, I'm kind of, you know, being facetious, but believe it or not, I mean, you know, you can put in something, and then all of a sudden it starts searching them out. And so, like having YouTube, don't let them have YouTube on their phones. Don't, on their switches. Making sure, like what Rose, I don't know if you said, or maybe you said it, Bridget, being able to come in, knowing exactly what they're looking at, during the day in an area, as a shepherd. I mean, that's just responsibility, and then if they do end up seeing it, which they will see it, you have to, confront it and say, what happened, and just have that discussion. It breaks your heart the first time that you have a discussion, because that childhood innocence that you feel, it's like, oh my gosh, it's lost, and quite honestly, Rose and I mean, we weep the first time our children saw, were exposed to it, whether they sought it out or it sought them. And so, and if they see you weeping, they know that, there's some kind of conviction of sin that's going on, and there needs to be repentance. And don't shove it under the rug. It's hard as a conversation as it is. And quite honestly, I won't get into too much detail. I remember with one of our children, Rose, we actually, saw it, I guess, and so I just remember Rose weeping, and it really had an impact on one of our child, and I don't think we can only count on so many hands, I guess, one hand that so pray for that, that there's an early conviction and early repentance, and often repentance, and move forward.
Right. Anytime anything like that happens, you just are thankful for the grace that you see it, that you know. I also just wanted to say one other thing. I know last week a lot of the panel were homeschoolers, and we are homeschoolers too. But I think if you decide to homeschool, it's just more time that you have to shepherd, and you have more time in the day, and it can easily, you have to have firmer boundaries, or I don't know, you just have more hours of the day that you have to keep them with other good things, doing other good things.
So we struggled with all these issues too, and we have boys and girls, and we frequently ask them, are they looking at anything they shouldn't be looking at? And we frequently ask them about their heart. And so getting back to setting it in the heart to know that it's sinful and wrong, and we would look at their phones, and then, and eventually when they get to a certain age, you know that they're like when they're 20, I mean, you got to quit. I mean, it's just one of those things. But you can keep asking what's in their heart, and you keep fishing that way. But, early on, it is hard. And I mean, you can, your children, you can look at them and know that something's not right. You don't know what it is, but eventually it'll come to light. But, and as far as video games, when they were younger, video games weren't such a problem for ours. I mean, early on when our kids were small, I mean, we controlled what they saw on the TV because it was on DVD, so we just didn't buy DVDs that were inappropriate. So, they could flip a DVD in, but I don't know what that is, but that's but now, I mean, you do stream everything, and it's convenient, it's nice, and it's dangerous, but you get a lot of data, a lot of information quickly. But so it's a guarding their heart thing, and you have to work at it all the time.
Wait. Can you say into the mic for our friends watching on simulcast?
My question is, do y'all actually use any of those apps out there that actually filter the things? Because I know there's a lot out there through all the other my friends that have kids that are y'all's age, actually pay for the service to filter all these things, because even when you're homeschooling, you watch a YouTube video, it's immediately those two, it's like, oh, you just searched Jaguars, well, guess what else came up? And you're like, that's not, no. So I didn't know if that at all possible, because they, like, all this SEO stuff was where they can actually pick out as it's getting searched. You can just shove it to the side. And I don't know if y'all use any of those.
We use Covenant Eyes for a while, and like you said, our youngest is 20 now. There's a time when you have to be your own moral agent, and you have to be accountable. We do still keep having conversations, but Covenant Eyes was good. We would get a report, weekly, daily? I can't even remember now, but of what was, and that was helpful, because it would show. It wouldn't allow this whatever site to come up, but it would show me that it was clicked on, like that somebody tried. So then you can have the conversation about why did you even click that, and that kind of thing. So they are helpful. I would definitely recommend it if little kids are getting on your laptops or whatever. Because there's a time when they're just too young to have to go there, You were about to say.
Or if you define the games they can play, on your phone or computer, you can play this block of games, and, they're not just having free reign with the phone.
Well, another thing about games, we just didn't buy them. We didn't get it. What was that other thing? The thing that they play games on? Huh? Xbox. And whatever you just said. DS. We just never bought them. And that goes into another question on here about my friends get to do that, but how come I can't do that? Because you live in this house. That's just what we do. That's a simplistic answer, but then that does give you the opportunity to say why we don't do that. We don't do that because it's not a wise use of your time. We're stewards of every gift God's given us, money, time. And so we just don't think that's a good use of our time. So,
Any others on that?
We've used the same Covenant Eyes.
Covenant Eyes, she says.
I think there's a Disney too that we use, a VPN. I forgot what it was, but do you remember what it was?
We also used a Disney app made by Disney.
But I wouldn't recommend that anymore, because Disney is, anyway.
It's corrupt. Let's move on to an easier question. Let's talk about dating and sex and that kind of thing. We're doing great. You guys, this is awesome. All right, so we all got it. Maybe we actually didn't, the talk. And our parents handled this in vastly different ways. But you guys have potentially all talked about it. What are some ways that you talked about dating with your kids, and maybe how would you have done differently if given the chance to, if you could do it differently? How would you?
I'd use an app early on. We've been through 2 marriages, and, they sought out each other, and we just tried to put expectations about what we expected of them while they were dating. We didn't expect them to be alone. We didn't expect them, we expect them to have dinner with us frequently or with other people. They could go out by themselves after a period of time, but so we kind of had parameters. Now, the flip side of that is, what does the boyfriend or girlfriend's parents think? Because that's where you get into trouble. Fortunately, we were very blessed. Both of ours had like-minded parents. Matter of fact, they were more strict than us. And that made it easy for us. But that's the flip side of the coin. I think you just have to raise the bar, put the expectations out early, and hold them accountable to that if you're dating. And, you know, going out with a group of friends, we didn't ever really consider that dating, even though they were out, you know. And we didn't consider that dating, but when it became one-on-one, then we had expectations, you know. So we talked about it frequently, so. And temptation, and that's why we guard their hearts, and we did things together with them a lot early on, and then, you know, but every situation's a little bit different, so.
Well, we're not quite there, thankfully.
Won't be long.
I know. But we both feel like, you know, the worldly view of dating is not one that we should encourage at all. And that our plan, anyway, is to discourage the exclusivity of dating until our children are actually in a position to think about marriage. That until then, it doesn't make a lot of sense. In fact, for me, it just was a huge distraction and caused a lot of heartache that was needless. I wasn't in a position to be thinking about a serious relationship, you know, at times when I thought I should have been. So that's kind of where we are. But I'm thankful to hear other people because we haven't really had to address this yet.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say about that is growing up as an unbeliever and living in an environment where we embraced a worldly view of dating at a young age. I mean, you know, in high school and having a girlfriend, someone you were going steady with. In my experience, it was nothing but heartache and temptation and trouble. So anything, as we see it, anything that we can do to prevent that from happening to our children at this age, in these coming years, I think we're all for whatever we can do to not let that happen. But it doesn't mean that we deny that they're going to have interest in kids of the other sex. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be attracted to other people or whatever. That's fine. But we just really feel like, you know, most worldly dating leads to heartache and regret and pain, and unfortunately that's, you know, part of my dating history, and I wish it weren't. But, you know, it's kind of motivated by that, I guess, in some sense.
This is a really hard subject because those of us that are in, I don't know if y'all encountered this or not, but the whole real conservative view of like, no dating. You're going to court for the purpose of marriage. And so there should just be one, right? Well, the problem is then guys are afraid to ask a girl out because they think, I need to be ready to marry her. And I don't even know her well. I just think she's cute or something. You know, I mean, so two of my children, I had to tell them, well, like, okay, my first one, I had to say, if a guy asks you out, she was in college at this point, it's okay to say yes. Because I know her. And she was like, dating? No. Not until I'm ready to marry him. And I'm like, but baby, how are you going to know? You know. So there's that. And then another one of our children, I had to say, you know, if there's anybody you're interested in, you could ask her out. Really? You know. So because of the whole real conservative thing that was going on around us and that we espoused part of, we were like, hey, I like that. Because we were in the same boat as far as dating young and realizing that was stupid. But at what point is it, okay, it's time now that you can start to, and so you have to be careful. Last week, Pastor Campbell said one reason not to homeschool is if you're doing it out of fear. But you shouldn't do anything out of fear. And that was one place that I'm afraid we were probably fearful at first, you know, and it showed.
Well, Lisa and I's relationship, we were high school sweethearts. So we started dating as seniors in high school. And we didn't come together as a couple with a lot of relationships. I mean, we didn't have broken heart relationships that happen. You know, we started dating young, and it worked out. So, and that's what happened with Karen and David. They started kind of liking each other, and as senior year of high school, and moved on, and that's kind of what happened with Andrew and Miller. And so when that, you know, I'm saying that's when they kind of get exposed to people that are like-minded, and if something is clicking, don't hold it back if it's a good situation, you know? I mean, there could be situations where you don't want that to happen, obviously, but don't be fearful of it, but talk about it a lot, and encourage them, and have a lot of accountability. I mean, Andrew and Matthew were third wheels a lot of times, you know, and they did that, and so that's just, it worked. But anyway.
I've been racking my brain trying to think of a name of a book that I bought or that I have about the prince and saving your first kiss for the prince. You know, it's R.C. Sproul, maybe, right? Yeah. Anyway, so if you want to know the name of the book, you can come ask me later, because I can't. Yeah, but I think that was a good. We just talked a lot when they were younger about guarding your heart, and I remember one of my daughters was on a swim team, and somebody started asking her questions about dating, and they said, "Oh, you're homeschooled? Well, what about prom? You don't get to go to prom?" And she said, "Well, I could do that." And she said, "You don't get to date boys?" And my daughter said, "Well, I really don't want to date boys. I want to wait until I date a man." You know, and I thought, how wise is that? You know, and so, you know, I think some of what we did early on, talking to them about dating and guarding their hearts, really has helped them to do that.
So I dated their mother. We met at a camp, but you know, I think, you know, a lot of things that we do with our children, we do the exact opposite, you know, on the extreme, and then we kind of start moving into the middle. Does that make sense? Not saying that that's the right thing to do, but I think, yeah, I would agree, you know, with you, Lisa. You know, there's a maturity level that, and certainly you want to encourage your kids, but let's be realistic. I mean, you're going to have that, you know, let's say one of those children are going to say, "Hey, I don't really adopt that, you know, view," and you know, they're going to be going out in groups, and they're going to, you know, maybe behind your back, you know, kiss on a guy or kiss on a girl. And again, you just got to expose that and confront it, you know, and say, "Hey, you know, why are you doing that?" And, you know, and it leads, one thing leads to another. And, you know, that's probably another question.
Guys really avoided the nitty gritty on that, but it's fine. Do you have something? Wait, hold on. Hold on. The internet needs to hear.
David and Lisa especially, would y'all speak to some opportunities that I know y'all created for your children to get together and do fun, prom-y kind of things, just social and volunteer type things where they could meet like-minded families in a good situation with chaperones where it wasn't awkward and weird?
Yes, thank you. I kind of forgot about all that. It seems like so long ago. Well, one thing that we did was the wonderful balls that Nancy used to help us organize and do. because families came from all over. North Georgia and South Carolina, and some of them, I don't know, we had up to like 300 people? 400 people. And parents were all there. We were all dancing, having a good time together, and they were all sweet families, you know. So that was a great, and it taught the young men how to be gentlemen and taught the young ladies how to be ladies, and it's not weird and awkward to dance with a guy. But this is how you should treat the situation. It's also not a silly thing, you know. So that was great. We also, just having our kids, this was providential. We didn't plan it, but having our kids in speech and debate was great because that mixed them up with children from 3 states and like-minded families and opportunities to hang out together all day long for 3 days. And you're terribly tired. But at the same time, it was well chaperoned. They had rules. But it gave them opportunity to just learn the social norms and what was appropriate and what wasn't, and that kind of thing. Our boys played football, and that was great because it was great on the football team that they played on. I'll put it that way. Because the dads coached, and they were coaching them not just on football, but also on life and how to be a Christian in life and on the football field. And there were cheerleaders, and there were girls doing the little flag things, and how you had to, you know, be respectful of them. And yeah, they're cute. It's okay to talk about that, but let's just talk about, you know, from here up. But so yeah, you want them to be in situations where they can be comfortable mixing up with the opposite sex, but you're there to help them understand the parameters or what's okay and what's not.
All right. Thank you, guys. Do we have another one? Oh, wait, come on up, Caleb. Just chatty this evening.
Well, so, I mean, it's all my buddies because I'm 37. We got 3 kids under 7, and you know, because of the world we live in, tabloids, grocery stores, whatever we're running into. At what age did you actually start that conversation of sex and all that kind of stuff? And then girl versus boy, and me and my buddy, he just had this conversation with his son, and he was like, Caleb, it was the most awkward, and he's never going to lunch with me again. So, just, could you kind of talk about that and figure out what that looked like for each kid? And I know each one's going to be different, because some can be clueless, and some are just like, oh yeah, you know, so.
Thank you.
Well, if you guys don't mind, I'll go first. I can speak to that because I just did it this past summer with Ethan, and we had this thing where we were going out for a walk every morning together in the summertime, and it was just a daily thing. And so one morning, we just decided, well, this is the time to have the talk. And it's about a 30-minute walk, and so in 30 minutes, we went through the birds and the bees and all that, and he was traumatized, would you say? It was sort of like, I'm being completely honest with you here. My objective was to get it all out there on the table, give him an opportunity to ask questions, and say, is there anything that I said that wasn't really clear to you? And he was just, you know, like, you know, mind blown, you know, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I think at the end of the day, he got it all. I mean, he listened intently, and I did the best I could. And your friend was right. It feels a little awkward, but at the same time, when you come at it from a godly perspective, you can also talk about the beauty of God's ways and the fact that God made this process. He made it beautiful. He made it to occur within marriage. He made it, you know, all this stuff kind of comes out of that conversation as well. And so as awkward as the nitty-gritty is, there's all this godly stuff surrounding it. And so that helped me a lot. And I hope it helped Ethan as well.
So some of the motivation for talking to Ethan was he was about to go to camp. And for the first time, he had never stayed away from home overnight. And we wanted him to know before he heard anything from his peers. And so we really wanted to be the ones to explain it to him. And we also wanted him to be able to recognize if something was wrong. And if anybody tried to do anything that was inappropriate or improper, that he would understand why it was so, unacceptable and why he needed to not accept it. And so it was more also a protection for him. And then I talked to Anna, and like Jeff was saying, in some ways I feel like it brought us closer because there were so many things, when you study the Bible as a family, there's so many verses that really puzzle them. And you're like, we'll explain it later. We'll explain it later. And so finally, it's just neat when they finally understand, and it's special when they get to that age where you can talk about things more openly, and then they can understand why pornography is terrible, and it helps them so that if they do come across it, they'll understand why this is, something they need to avoid. Because if not for the understanding, I think it's just confusing. So.
And don't do too much memory work in the Song of Solomon at an early age.
And wait, so that would have been 13?
So Ethan he had just turned 12, and Anna was probably 13. And Ethan just recently, to add a little anecdote, he thought that puberty was a long way off. He didn't realize, and Anna was like, "You're about to go through puberty," and he was just like, again.
I came from a family where we never had the talk. I never had that talk with my parents. And matter of fact, I didn't talk to my parents about a lot of things. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of instruction. So when we had children, it's very important to me that I talk to them a lot, and we talk about, there's no subject off limits to talk to us about. And so the approach that I took, and I remember talking to other moms about that through the CC community, which is what we homeschooled, and I got ideas from them. But I used some books that were, at age 5, you read this book, and it's it's broached the subject of where babies came from, but in a very just basic, general. And it has questions that prepared you for questions you might get. But basically, I didn't tell them anything that they didn't ask. And then at another age, a little later, and I used those books as a guideline, and that was very helpful. And so I have to say it was never really painful doing that. It was not some weird conversation. So I like that method. It's one of the things that I liked.
I agree, and I think your family dynamics, every family's different, and like Rose said, I grew up in a family that was very transparent. We talked about everything. Jack could probably relate, in a Christian family, and so I think when we came together, we were just very, we prayed about everything. So I think, and we're still, I think I've already had that talk with the son, as you were saying, before the camp and that kind of thing, and you want to have ongoing discussions too, because their friends are going to expose them to things like I've already shared, even here at church. It might be one of their friends, and that they've been exposed, and so you want to continue, at least finding out, where they are and what they're looking at, and I think I've already kind of shared that, so I don't want to be redundant.
Okay. So I was wondering, this is something that is becoming more and more relevant. I don't know if it was as much when your kids were growing up, but let's just say, scenario, your child comes home from something and they say, Julia has decided that she wants to be Jamie now. This is, it sounds ridiculous, but we are all probably going to encounter that at some point. Can you guys just briefly share what are some ways that you could respond to that in a way that keeps the door open for friendship but also allows you to speak truth to your children, if that makes sense?
It's hard to explain, but we have two teachers in our family. That one's a middle school teacher and one's a high school teacher, and they tell us that people are claiming to be bisexual before they go through puberty. I mean, they don't even know what that means. It's just a real trendy thing. I'm going to be cool. I'm going to say I'm going to be this. They don't really. I think a lot of times they don't really know what it means in certain age groups. But I think you have to have that discussion. Why do you think that person feels that way? And do you think that's godly? And that's the way I would throw it back on them, is to say, God made them a certain way, and their parents gifted them with a name and a reputation and whatever. But, why would they feel that way? And that, I think they have to explore that to see. And obviously, transgender stuff is everywhere. It hits the media. It's a highlight of all the tabloid stuff. And so it's out there, and it wasn't there 15 years ago. But it's there today, and you're just going to be upfront about it. You're just going to have to face it and talk to them about it early and realize that it's, I think you'd have to say, it doesn't sound like it's God's way, I think.
We recently had a conversation, I think, with one of the girls. It was about this, kind of binary gender. I think the Genesis account is right, spot on, Jeff. And, one thing that I would say is, when you have that conversation with your children, you don't know where they're going to run into that, whether they're going to see it on the media or if they're going to, be on the playground. I mean, I hope not, but we're seeing more and more of that. But basically, one of the conversations I was having with one of our daughters recently was, we come from a broken, we're all broken families, and the only difference in our family, that's brokenness. You can just spot on, you just call it, sin pattern, whatever, but it's a broken, that there's something wrong there. And, what I told one of the girls is, we're a family of brokenness, but the only difference is we have Christ. We have Christ that has rescued us, and, hopefully they're going to rescue these individuals that are troubled. They're greatly troubled.
Just add, remembering that Satan's the author of confusion. And I think thinking about it that way gives us compassion when you're talking to someone that is struggling with that. They're just confused. So you can be, you don't want to run from it. You just want to speak truth. And it's a blessing of raising your children in the church, and they're grounded. They have no excuse not to be grounded, and to speak truth into that.
Thanks, guys. Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and I'm going to keep it dry. Let's talk about finances. I hate talking about finances. Eric knows. I never look at that spreadsheet, man. Probably because my parents didn't teach me about finances. So let's talk about that. Do you guys, what are some ways that you have taught your kids about, like setting up bank accounts? Wow, I'm falling asleep. But I don't know. Do you let them have allowances? What are the pros and cons of that kind of thing? you know, how do you make them responsible little spenders, and savers, that kind of
Well,
stuff?
we've done a lot of good stuff and a lot of bad stuff. But as to allowances, we did not give allowances. You know, we gave them nice birthday presents, and if they had needs, I mean, if you need a computer to go to college, okay, you know, but we didn't encourage that. What we did, we had the mill, and we encouraged our kids to work in the mill, and they got paid. So they got paid for working, and then they could decide how that was their money, and how they managed it was up to them. We did get them checking accounts early, pretty early, not like 10 or 12, but, you know, up close to driving age, to be able to let them have some freedom of finances that were now with debit cards, you can see where they're spending their money. You know, if they go to Starbucks 5 days in a row, you can talk about that and what that means, and that you're not putting any more money in the account. And we also, you know, spent time talking to our kids about investing and what that looks like, and how to make efforts toward that, and just we talk about finances a lot in our family. So
You're forgetting what you did early, because he's really good at this. But when they were really young, he made these little boxes about this big, and in there were those little, I call them Tupperware, but they're not. Anyway, they like you'd put left or your salad dressing or something in for your lunch, you know, about that big. Anyway, 3 of them, and one was for spending, one was for saving, and one was for tithing. And so whenever they got money, whether it was because they only got paid for working at Tim's mill. They didn't get paid for doing their chores at home, because that was just expected. But when they worked at the mill, that was was our job as a family. So they got paid. And whenever they got money for that, or birthday money from the grandparents or whatever, we started teaching them that, you know, yes, you got some to spend because that's a blessing, but you should also save because that's a good steward. And first off goes the tithe. That's the first thing you do from the very beginning. And so you started real young. You just forgot that part.
they kind of fizzled out.
Well, they did, but
This is really Jeff's area more than mine, but I was just going to share one thing. We did recently start allowances, so we haven't done it all along. Oops, my notes. But the thing that I've liked about it is we've explained that, okay, you can have an allowance, you're part of this household, but it also means you have to contribute to the household. And if you do it with complaining and arguing, then it gives us a way to say, okay, well, you've lost $5 of your allowance this month. It's a nice way to have different consequences for them, and it speaks pretty loudly to them when we take away part of their allowance. So they have a sense of earning it by having a good attitude.
Yeah, and most recently we did open savings accounts for them. So we go take them to the bank so that they can make a physical deposit, so they actually get the sense of actually saving. And so it's actually leaving my hand and going into the bank, so I can actually see it happening. And then not long ago, their grandfather gifted them some money in which I opened up brokerage accounts for them to have investments in some stocks and bonds and things like that. And so we've been watching the stock market for about 9 months now. We've been talking about what it's doing day to day, just talking about how their wealth is, increasing and decreasing over time, and what investing even means, and what does it mean that I own a stock, or that I own a stock fund or a mutual fund or whatever. And so it might sound really dry. Wake up, Claire. It sounds dry, but it's terribly important for them, I believe, to understand that at an early age, so that when the time comes and they actually have money of their own, they can even think about investing and, getting a good start on that. And of course, giving is, to the Lord is part of what we do as well.
Caleb, you want to just have my seat? He gets an A plus dad.
Well, no.
We're paying him.
Just this past Sunday, since we started passing the plates around, Lindley's like, "What is this for?" And I was like, well, Daddy gives online because he gets 1% on the credit card, so I can actually give more." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" So, at what point do you actually explain, like, give them the money so they can physically see it go out of the house, because they're not going to see me scan the QR code and all that kind of stuff and give, extra that way, because the credit card really is just paying extra to give to the church. They just don't know that.
I mean, just real quick, when they were younger, I mean, almost every Sunday, Jeff would give them something to put in the offering plate. It's not maybe a sense of it coming from them right away, but it does get them in the habit and kind of excited about giving to the Lord.
I think in this, electronic world, that's the way it's all going. Their life will be a non-cash environment. Most of my kids now do not carry cash on them at any time, and they have only debit cards and credit cards. And so I think you just have to talk about that. I think you just have to talk about where the money went and how it went there and why it went there. They're not going to understand the 1% rule, but eventually they will. But I think you just have to talk about it. And if you are online, looking at your statement, and the kids are by, say, "Hey, look, this is what we gave to the church." So it's on here, And I think that's them to visually see it that way is about the only thing you can do if you do it electronically.
One other thing, this is a really big picture, but I think we realize that debt, training our children about the dangers of debt was very important. And Steve paid his way through college, and he saw a great value in that. And so from early on, we told our children that they would be responsible for their college. And I know not a lot of people don't do that, but for us, I think that really added some weight to their studies in high school. I mean, they knew if they didn't work hard, they probably weren't going to go to college. So I think it did help increase their work ethic. And the other thing I was going to say was that when they start earning money, they'll quickly realize that they don't know where it went, like we all. And so I think part of it's our job to educate them, and we used Financial Peace. So by the time they've graduated, they've gone through the Financial Peace, and they know the dangers of debt. That's one of our responsibilities to them. And every dollar or some kind of app, use these apps for your, track your expenses on an app. I think it's very helpful for all of us.
All right. Well, guys, we made it through the finances question. No, seriously. Am I the only one in this room who would rather have the sex talk than the money talk? Anyone? Can I get a retweet? No, but seriously. Thank you guys so much. All I can say is that when I sent out this list of questions, I'm surprised any of you guys showed up, honestly. Lisa was just like praying. So thank you so much. These are really not necessarily fun topics, but I just am so grateful because our families will be blessed because you guys took the time to think about this and talk with us. I hope these can be ongoing conversations. We didn't even get to the goblins, so sorry about that. You'll have to come back next week because we're doing discipline. It's all about goblins. I'm on fire. All right. it's after bedtime. We got to rescue the nursery workers. Thank you guys so much for coming. Remember, next week is discipline. Text in your questions and tell your friends. And then the week after that is Dr. Terry Johnson. So, all right. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.